Are we good? All right. Are we ready to fire it up again? All right, let's fire it up again. We'll pick up with Elijah and come back to where we left him. We walked him through just this series. It's really remarkable when you stop and see what's going on in Elijah's life. It is, if you will, this microcosm of a process that is so holistic in looking at Elijah's life, bringing him back to a place of functioning. You might consider him in some ways as a template for a lot of our lives, just in terms of regular routine practice. For others that may be dealing with a deeper level of issue from day to day, not only is it a template that is of value, but you go back to those tangibles. And any time there's some aspect that's taking place in a person's life, you're always wanting to see the material things that are tangible. What can I lay my hands on in this moment to bring me back to that place of reality? There's a great book, to See Another, to Know Another. The author's name is Arthur Brooks. To Know Another Person, I think, is a loose representation of the title. He tells a story that is about his dear friend that is no longer living, but he tells the story of his life when he suffered from a deep, deep depression in his life and ultimately ended his life as a result of that. The book is fantastic, although it's not the sum total theme of the book. That particular chapter that he writes on gives this beautiful picture of a man who is a friend to a friend and realizes that there was a lot going on in his friend's life that he did not understand, that he did not comprehend. And his friend also had some of the finest medical minds and practitioners around, and still the end result was not what anyone wanted to see. So oftentimes in one person's life, that is the nature of what's happening. You're seeing worlds collide within the context and the setting of certain aspects of the element of their life. You have the circumstance of their life. You have the context of the moment. That's really what you see happening in Elijah's life. There was the circumstance of the moment. There was the context of the moment. There was his path of thinking in that moment. And these worlds collide. What's one of the first things that Elijah said to God? Do you remember? I wish you would just take my life now. Elijah accused God of so many things, and ultimately he said, God, just why are you even leaving me here? In fact, Elijah finds himself in the same company as he did many others of God's true heroes. He finds him in the same company of Job. He finds him in the same company of David. He finds him in the same company of these patriarchs who said, why is this circumstance happening? Just get me out of here. It's a phenomenon that we call coupling. It's where our place has come in terms of the context of our thinking, the circumstance of our life, and when those two worlds collide, it can oftentimes end in total disaster. For an excellent picture of that, see the Philippian jailer in Acts 16. Paul and Silas are thrown in prison. Where are they placed in prison? Do you remember? Paul and Silas were placed in the innermost cell, or the innermost part of the jail. My granddad would have said they were so wicked they put them under the jail, right? That's kind of that image that they did such terrible things, in so much as those authorities were concerned, they put them in the innermost part of the jail. They were singing and praying at midnight, and then a large earthquake occurs. And what happens when the earthquake occurs? The jail cells, right, are flung open. The doors are flung open. What happens to the jailer? He is awakened. He's asleep on the job. That doesn't go over well for job reviews. But aside from that, he is awakened by the earthquake. And what does he see? He sees the jail cell standing open. And what does he conclude? Prisoners have escaped. And in his conclusion, he draws another conclusion. The prisoners have escaped. They've escaped on my watch. And it's my responsibility. And I'm going to be killed as a result. And so he draws yet another conclusion. I will be far more merciful by taking it in my own hand than my superiors will. And then as he draws his sword to end his life, here again we're thinking about that idea of coupling, context of thinking, circumstance of the scenario. There's a voice that pierces through the darkness, and what does that voice say? Do yourself no harm, for we are all still here. for something, and may we even say specifically for someone, be the voice that pierces through a darkness. I'm telling you right now, you may not always see or know the level or the depth of darkness that is in someone's life. It's just a true point of fact. You cannot know unless others reveal it. And even when they do reveal it, even then we may not be able to comprehend or grasp the depth that is there. So in the nature of piercing through that darkness, be in the position to be that person who pierces through the darkness, even the darkness that you may yourself not be able to see. It's why one of the reasons we as God's people should be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another. We should behave toward one another in the manner that is that encouraging spirit of life, and it gives that opportunity. It's the call that Elijah receives from God. God does not rebuke Elijah. God does not criticize Elijah. God does not accuse Elijah of a pity party. God intervenes with Elijah and says, first let's rest. Now let's eat. Let's rest again. And now let's think about how we're thinking. And now let's return to a way of behaving. I'm not telling you that Elijah never went through another bad day, but I'm telling you Elijah abandoned some things that were essential in the midst of a time that he did not need to abandon. And then he tells Elijah, let me call you back to relationships. There were 7,000 other people who have not bowed the knee to Baal. Let's connect again in community. You will be told, and I am told, we are all told, that there is a better place to be found among people in the same regard. It does not mean that everybody around you always understands exactly everything that's going on in you, but there is value and benefit by others being present. I think one of the challenges that we face in our world is being too offended and too resentful that other people haven't experienced the experience I've experienced. And thus, since they haven't experienced the experience I've experienced, there's no way they could understand what I'm going through. I want to put you into perspective of what Jesus did with that. Jesus went into the garden on the night that he was to be betrayed, and who did he invite with him? Peter, James, and John. Let me just ask, is there any possible way they could have reasonably conceived what Jesus was preparing to go through or was going through in that moment? I mean, they have no frame of reference whatsoever what he's going through. But he invites them, come with me. If the Son of God invites others to just be present with him in a moment, we might be able to learn from that as well. Being willing to have others join us in moments where we really don't know what the answer is. Even Jesus himself asked for some other answer than the answer he was facing and then surrendered, nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. Even in the moment when we're confused about what to do next, we lean upon and rest in the fact that there are others around us who are at least here with us and bring us that blessing. All right, let's think about not only the burden, but let's look at some blessings of some alternative ways of thinking in terms of just day-to-day levels of functioning and operation. It is to say that we encounter it in such a way that we find a unique blessing in the nature and the manner of our modes and modalities of our thoughts. I want to center you on a text, and I want to take us to a process to put the text into practice. Let's unpack, first of all, Isaiah 26 and verse 3. If you have your Bibles, you want to just follow along on the screen, we'll unpack it in a few words. You will keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on you, because he trusts in you. How is that, and in what manner is that accomplished? Or what does that even look like? I want to tell you that the presence of anything emotional or behavioral in our life, anything that we struggle with by way of our anxiety or way of our depression or ways of aspects of our thinking, I want to tell you that these are not markers of an absence or a lack or a void of faith. Is it okay that we say that? Can I tell you that these are not indicators that this person has no faith or zero faith or an absence of faith? I want to tell you that in the midst of our facing these realities, we are facing these realities as people of faith. I mean, we're people of faith that say these things are real. We're people of faith that are saying it's not just remedied because I'm not praying enough or reading my Bible enough. We're people of faith that say, I know these things are real. I'm doing all of these other things, and I'm still struggling in this regard. So what does that struggle look like, and how do I answer it? Can I tell you the presence of these things is not a marker of the absence of faith? I'm telling you that by the observance of these things, there are ways where people of faith who have encountered very similar aspects and very similar attributes, how they have responded. And so too, then may we. Let's think about it through what Isaiah says here. He's saying a lot more than just a few words. First and foremost, look at the first phrase. You will keep him in perfect peace. I want you to think about the word perfect. In the Hebrew as well as in the Greek Septuagint, here's the word. It's a word that means complete, or it's a word that means whole. It's a word that means wellness. It's a word that means safety or soundness, welfare or health or prosperity, peace or quiet or tranquility. It's the idea where it's strictly giving us the picture all things have been brought together in the manner that they need to be brought together in this moment. Can I tell you, it does not mean it's a removal from the moment, nor does it mean it is a removal of the moment. In other words, God is not necessarily taking me out of the moment, nor is God taking away the moment. It's that idea of peace that is present in the midst of the moment. You'll keep him in a whole, well, tranquil place. How are we going to get there? Well, keep going in the text. You will keep him in perfect what? Contentment, peace. Watch this. It's an idea of friendship. It's an idea of connection. It's an idea of relationship, both with God and with people. Sometimes my peace is found when nobody's bothering me. Yes? Right? Maybe when nobody's knocking on the door, when I haven't hidden in the bathroom just to find a moment's break, and then here come the hands under the door, right? Sometimes it's when nobody's bothering me. Sometimes peace comes when I'm connected to other people. Sometimes peace comes when I am engaged in my relationships. Sometimes peace comes especially when I'm in that covenant place with God. I recognize that peace. There is an absence of the war. There is an absence as peace as an adjective. This is now a motivating peace. This is a moving portion of my life and of my work. This is what it looks like in the nature of my world or in the nature of my being. Keep going a little further. You'll keep him in perfect peace whose mind. What are we saying here? Well, perfect peace, remember, is that peace that is in peace. It is that perfection, that wholeness of peace in my mind. This is my aspect of my framing. This is my aspect of how I see the world around me, how I see the world within me. It's taken really from the idea of pottery and the making of objects, or even the making of images, like a man formed from the dust, or like a bowl or a dish that's been created for a purpose. I think about the nature of how things may happen in our lives. Listen, physical disease will occur in our life. It doesn't mean that God created me for the purpose of that physical disease. At the same time, emotional disturbance and distress will be present in life. It doesn't mean that God created me for the purpose either to weaponize that upon me or to use that against me. But it's a reality that comes into my life. Although those realities are present, it does not mean now that my purpose, as designed by God, has been negated because either one or both or all of those things have touched my life. My purpose is still there. So you'll keep him in perfect peace whose mind, my understanding of my purpose, is what? Is stayed. This is literally leaned up upon, laid upon, resting upon, supported upon, leaning up against, sustained by, refreshed by, revived by the nature of that which is supporting my way. He'll keep him in perfect peace whose mind is leaned on what? On the nature of God. Why is it upon the nature of God? Because in God I trust. I think about in my own family where depression has reigned supreme for many generations. I think about the nature of how in the aspect of trust, where does trust find its place? Do I trust patterns or processes of the generations? Or do I realize the presence of things in the patterns and processes of generations? And now do I place my trust in those patterns or processes, or do I place trust in what God is able to do in spite of and above those patterns and processes? I place my trust. What is it? I place confidence. I place boldness. I place security. I place the feeling of safety, and I am the moment of, or the act of being careless. Not careless to the point where you break everything or fall over everything, but caring less about the aspects that can very often infiltrate our path and our patterns of thinking. So, with that in mind, what do we do about the things that we believe in our core and what we see as ourselves? I think about what Jerry was sharing earlier in his statement about those highs and lows and those patterns of thinking, or those patterns of thinking things that never really pan out. What do we do in the address of that? Jerry, I stopped to think about that. I only do that sort of thinking on days that end in Y, so you're probably ahead of me on that. I only think like that on days that end in Y. Those processes of where I will place out or craft out scenarios that come my way. How do I address those ultimately never pan out, or those things never happen? Well, at my core beliefs, it's really critical to ask myself, what do I believe? Well, some of us believe some pretty rotten things at our core. We believe some pretty false things. We believe I'm bad, or I'm not enough, or I cannot be enough. We believe I'm a failure, I'll never be good enough, God doesn't love me, I'm unlovable. These are, in many ways, the broken narratives that reign supreme in the midst of many episodes of life that are among the darkest of the dark. These are some of those repetitive statements, some of those negative aspects that... anybody have a record player still? Anybody go to the Smithsonian and see a record player? Do you remember when records would skip or scratch? They get stuck in that place. I'm telling you, in the record of some folks' minds, there are some things that are just playing on repeat, and they're just dastardly in their life, and they are so negative, they're so harmful, and they're so destructive, and they play over and over and over and over. They are these false notions. These false notions. Are there others that maybe coincide with this list? I mean, this list is not exhaustive by any means. It's just picturing the idea of the things that we may tell ourselves. Maybe you have something to add or contribute to the negative or the false things that we may think. Well, what do we do with them? Well, we let them rule and dominate. I mean, they influence so much. What about some core beliefs that are true? I mean, how do we confront false beliefs? Well, we have to confront them with something other than just the falsity. I want you to observe this. We're not taking away the possibility or the probability that some of these things might be a reality. I'm just saying, how do we see them and how do we frame them? I have done bad things, but I am not bad. I mean, that's true as true can be. All have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. That's consistent with what we believe in our biblical worldview. I am enough in Christ. On my own, yes, you're right. My life is filthy rags. I mean, I don't have anything to offer just of my own ability, but of Christ I have all I need. I am not defined by my mistakes. My past or what has been done or who I used to be or how I used to live does not define who I am. God has justified and reconciled me to Him. I mean, we come to recognize the nature of purpose and belonging and the self of our identity. God loves me unconditionally. I am loved and I am lovable. How do we affirm these things in our lives? Well, in so many ways, we're challenged in our core belief. Where do core beliefs come from? You know, for some people, they come from the nature of the world around them. They come from things that they have been taught or the things that they've been raised to believe, or they come from the voices around them in their lives. Sometimes our core beliefs come from the negative things that we have adopted somewhere along the way, in some pattern along the way that exist within ourselves. And it's aberrant, really, when you stop and think about it. but our core beliefs come from a certain place. I would observe it to you not in the realm of an emotional concern, but just in the realm of reality. I received a phone call a number of years ago from a young man. He said, "Would you be able to marry me and my girlfriend on Thursday?" I was in my office, and it was a Tuesday when I took this call. And I asked in reply, I said, "Do you mean Thursday as in the day after tomorrow, Thursday?" And he said, "Yes, that's exactly what I mean." I said, "Well, could you come by and can we visit?" He came by and he brought his girlfriend with him. We visited for a while. I didn't know much of anything about their story, and we visited for a while. Come to find out, they were two individuals who were on parole, and they were living together. And at that time, in the state where I was living and where they were living, it was against the law for two parolees to be cohabitating together who were not married. And so, by their estimation, in order to remedy this and make it to where it's good for both of us and not a violation of our parole, we'll get married and we'll avoid being sent back to prison if our parole officer comes and checks on us. Well, I didn't know that was the best thing to do in order to help them. And so we visited for a good bit at that time, and we talked about a great many things in their life. Do you know, across their life together, I come to find out she was now pregnant and expecting their child, and a number of other issues were revealed. And so we unfolded a conversation across a period of time. And here's what I want to tell you about the thing that stood out to me in that moment among many things. As we shared the aspects of just where life is and what might be a benefit, we shared the idea and the concept of what marriage could be, but how to enter into marriage, and really if there were some alternatives that we could find to get them in two separate places. And if they're still asserting for marriage, we'll help you get there. But in the journey of that and the conversation of that, the young lady looked across the table at me and she said, "I had no idea. I had no idea that it was wrong or sinful or against anything about God to sleep with a man that you weren't married to." How about that? You know, Paul asked a question, "Do you not know that some of you will not inherit the kingdom of God?" Do you know the answer to that question? The answer is no. Some people don't know that. How come? I'll tell you why. Because some people don't have core beliefs that have been generated from a place that speaks about purpose and worth and value. And some people who do have those core beliefs have allowed other things to infiltrate and influence core beliefs and then corrupt core beliefs in a very, very, very diabolical way. As a result, how do we alter our core beliefs? Right, wrong, or indifferent to the world's observation and standard today, I'm telling you that there is no way to alter core beliefs until we begin ingesting that into our life that will tell us something greater about who we are, in whose image we've been made, the purpose and the value that our life holds, regardless of where our life has been, regardless of what has occurred in our life. The core beliefs that center into some people's lives have been so distorted by the world's message that God's people must come along and offer compassion and care, and let me say this, clarity to who they are and the purpose and value that they hold. How do we get to the place of reshaping core beliefs? Do not be conformed to this world. We'll spend time on Romans 12, verses 1 and 2 in the morning, but we'll just simply share it now. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. How do we renew the mind? Well, we start in many places with our thoughts. I love 1 John 3 and verse 20. Have you ever read something over and again and read through a book and you come to a place and you think, how have I missed that? I mean, 1 John 3 and verse 20 is one of those verses for me. 1 John 3 and verse 20 says this, "If my heart condemns me, if my heart condemns me. Now, stop right there. If my heart condemns me. Remember what Proverbs 23 and verse 7 says, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. What if I have a condemning heart in my life? Watch this. Jesus said, here's the second greatest commandment. You shall what? You shall love your neighbor as yourself. What if I can't stand myself? Watch this. Love says it will keep, 1 Corinthians 13, it will keep no record of wrong, thinks no evil, some translations say. What happens when I don't have a love for myself and the only record I keep of myself, be it true or false, is a record of all the things I've ever done wrong, gotten wrong, said wrong, been wrong, gone wrong? What if that's the only record I keep of myself? What am I to do? 1 John 3 and verse 20. If my heart condemns me, God is greater than my heart. Watch this. And knows all things. How about that? I think I know all things about my life. And honestly, friends, many of the things that we think we know about our lives are manifestations and distortions of things that they're nowhere near the truth of our life. You may think some of the most demeaning things about self. Those are not true. It's not how God sees our lives. It's just not. Some may even weaponize God to tell you that that's how God would see you. Listen, bad representatives of Jesus do not negate the truth of who Jesus is. Poor spokesmen for God do not undo what truth God has communicated. So don't let the bad proxies of God or of Jesus stand in your way of what God has said your life is. If my heart condemns me, God is greater than my heart and knows all things. Watch this. It impacts every aspect. So it impacts how I see and how I feel about who I am. Thus, the idea of guarding my heart. Guard your heart with all diligence, for out of it flows the issues of life. Incidentally, when the phrase or the verbiage heart is used in Scripture, God is not referencing a blood pump. He's just not referencing that muscle. It is a hard-working muscle. Don't get me wrong. It's a hard-working muscle. And you know when that muscle's not working well. You know that. Your whole body knows that. That's a hard-working muscle. But when God references the heart of the individual, He's truly referencing the pattern and the means and the mind of thinking. Our family has owned and operated a shelter care facility for a number of years in southern Illinois for the developmentally delayed and the mentally impaired. Those whose patterns and pathways of thinking have been severely altered and disrupted through the course of life and events of living. And their distinction of how to delineate between reality and falsity is all but gone. The reality sets in, though, for those that are not among that population and for those that are not cutting through those obstacles and barriers. How we center in on our path of thinking will lead to us a difference and a distinction of feeling. Can I tell you it's not instantaneous? For some people, we have lived in certain patterns for 10 and 15 and 20 and 30 and 40 years. Do you know when God called Abraham to leave the land of the Ur of the Chaldeans, and He told him to go to a land that He would show him, and he would go to a land that he would inherit? Do you know how long it took Abraham or Abram to leave that land and then actually venture on out of that land? From the time that God called to the time that he left, do you know how long it took him? 15 years. Now, when we tell the story of Abram, what do we say? God called Abram, and what did He do? Dude, he packed up. He went home and he told Sarah, get your stuff, we're leaving. I'm going to call Lot and see if he wants to go, and if he does, that's great, but we're going now. Read through the text of Genesis 12. There's a little spot in there where Abram stops. And he stops until a certain event takes place. You know what that event is? his dad dies. And then he leaves town. Now you can say this is Brian, all right? Not Bible. This is Brian, not Bible. But Brian's going to speculate that there was some interpersonal dynamic going on between Abram and his dad that made it hard for Abram to cut all the ties all at once and go. And what does God still call Abram? Abraham, the father of faith. Can I tell you that it's going to take us all time to grow in our lives to get to the places where we need to be? Standing behind one another saying, hurry up, come on. Why aren't you there yet? Why aren't you there yet? Why aren't you there yet? Do you do that with your kids in the morning when you're trying to get them out the door and go to school? Come on, get your shoes, get your backpack. Why don't you should have your homework done. Why is your homework not done? Get in the car, we're going to be late. Hurry up, get out of the car, get to the school, Lord. I mean, when you get old and they're picking you up, they're going to be standing behind you saying, come on, we need to get out the door, we need to hurry up, we need to go on, come on. And you'll wonder, where'd they get that from? Well, they learned it pretty well, right? Listen, none of us are going to get to the places we need to be in our lives instantaneously. Some of our patterns of thinking and feeling and doing and behaving and living, they have been shaped over a long period of time. But I'm telling you that there is nothing this side of eternity that God cannot aid and help and usher us through to a new blessing and a new place of being and beginning. Our core beliefs must be altered if we desire for anything to be reshaped in our life and our pattern of living. Remember this, we are so often needing to address the underlying spiritual problems that go along with the symptomology we see in life. There are reasons why some of the aspects of what's going on around us, the symptomology, are happening. But because we're not addressing the underlying spiritual condition, we'll attack and chase rabbits. Listen, a headache is going to come out, but Tylenol or aspirin or ibuprofen is going to do little good if that headache is there because of a brain tumor. I mean, we have to address the underlying issues in life in so many regards and in so many aspects in order to make the progress and the opportunity for health and healing, even mental health, to be present in the lives of the vast majority of God's people. It is our opportunity and our high calling to do so. What are the thoughts that you have, or questions or observations or concepts to bear out? Or maybe considerations that we can share together while we're together. You've been so thoughtful and kind, and your grand attention. Going once, going twice. Listen, I've delivered my bale of hay, and I told you last night what we do with the bales of hay. We deliver them, and you consume them, and then it's up to you to do something else with them. Your attention has been tremendous. Your thoughtfulness is grand. I am so thankful to know you all and to know that you're concerned about people's welfare. I'm not addressing my graduate students or my doctoral students. I'm addressing folks that don't live and work and operate in the mental health community. I'm addressing folks like me who are just boots on the ground every day, living life and loving people. And if you can be equipped to be a light shining in a dark place, if you can be equipped to put a rock in your own shoe to interrupt your patterns of thinking, to help you embrace better and healthier habits, then God be praised for that. Yes, sir, Mr. Bill. Steve. You know what? Mr. Steve asked how they found us. He had relatives that attended the congregation where I was preaching. And although they were not actively there attending with us, his relative was a member there. And so either they asked the relative or had been visiting with the relative and they reached out. That was some 20 years ago. And let me give you the Paul Harvey rest of the story. That young couple came and we visited for a long time, and they wound up, I didn't marry them on a Thursday, I'll tell you that. I didn't marry them on a Thursday. They wound up visiting with the rest of their family. And so they moved them into 2 separate locations so that they wouldn't violate their parole. And then They both became employed, and they both became stable in their life. They both were battling addiction, which they overcame, and then we eventually performed their wedding, but not before she obeyed the gospel, and she was several months pregnant. That was as close to an infant baptism as I'll ever get. And so she obeyed the gospel. It was beautiful, beautiful, and then they married, and their life took a beautiful turn from that moment. You know, I was much younger then. I still like to think I'm decently young now, but I was much younger then. In that moment, it dawned on me, and it still dawns on me now, how so many people they didn't live the way I lived. They didn't grow up the way I grew up. They didn't hear the same things I heard growing up. So their core beliefs of just aspects of God and living and the things of God were nowhere near their realm of awareness. It was very sobering to me to be hit like that. Thank you for asking. Well, yes, sir. Well, they can be. Sometimes, Mr. Steve, you're right. Sometimes we're hesitant to walk with people in difficult places. I'm not saying I've done that every time. In 25 years of ministry, I got into behavioral health because when I started off like Jared as an elementary school teacher. I was teaching third grade, and I promise you, when people came to me on that third grade hall, when they found out that I had been hired by a church to be their minister, I was 22 years old, teaching the third grade, and every one of these teachers, all the months before I was hired as a minister, visited with me in the teacher's lounge about this and that and whatnot, and here we go, and let's have a good time, and what are your students up to, and here's what mine are up to. But the day word got out that was my role, people started coming into my classroom during my prep period, bringing to me their marital distress, their emotional distress, their familial distress. I didn't know what to tell these people. I got into behavioral health out of self-defense. I didn't know. You've got person after person after person coming in, and it's as though somehow you're now expected to be infused with some type of knowledge. I am not one to believe. Some may disagree with it, and that's fine. It doesn't bother me. After 25 years, it doesn't bother me. I believe that every aspect of all life is guided by what God has to provide and say through His Word. I don't believe there's anything in this world that we're confronting that is new under the sun. No temptation has overtaken you except such as is common to man. God is faithful that whatever temptation you're tempted, He'll provide a way of escape. That way of escape may not be pleasant, easy, or simple, but He will provide the way of escape. I believe that with all of my being. That being said, I believe that when we find more tools to connect the people and the problems they face with the power and the purpose of the Word of God, we're going to be able to help them. And just where I was in my context, that's what did it for me. And so I thought, here's how I thought I'll take care of that. I'll go take a graduate course. And 1 turned into 2, and 2 turned into 3, and 3 turned into a certificate. The certificate turned into a master's of mental health, and that turned into a PhD. And all I know now is I still don't know enough. I mean, that's it. And that's the reality of it. But I know God has the answers for where we are and what we need in this world. And I think, too, the nature of being willing to walk with people. We're not going to have the answers. And some of the best help that Job was ever given when Job's life, fell apart. Did his life not fall apart? Any of you buried 10 kids in one time? Have your wife want you to curse God and die? Lose all of your financial holdings, all of the employees that work for you? Job's life fell apart. Stricken with disease, head to toe, the man was stricken with disease, head to toe. Would sit in burning pots of ash and cut his body. And the best thing that happened to Job was when his 3 friends showed up and did what? Sat on the ground and said nothing for 7 days straight. That was the best help the man ever received. Do you know when his problem started? When his friends opened their mouths and started telling him all the things he had done wrong. That's when Job's real problems kicked in. Job, here's what we think you ought to be doing with your life. Here's why you're in this mess, and you just listen to us, you get out of it. mean, some people need people to show up, sit down, and shh, shh, shh. Just be there. Just be there. I mean, you may sit in that room with someone that they haven't moved for a day, maybe a week, I don't know. You may be a presence for them and be a blessing to them. My granddad dealt with depression, believed things about his life that simply were not true. It's probably why I'm very ardent on cognitive behavioral aspects. And so he believed things about his life that were not true. His life came to an end when he was 79. He went out to hook up the bush hog to the tractor and had a massive heart attack, laid down right by it and died. I mean, we couldn't have written a better way for him to leave this earth. That's exactly what he wanted to do. Got up from the lunch table, told his wife, my Meemaw, said, I'm going to go make this place look like something. Had a massive heart attack, laid down right there and died. Always believed, at least in my growing up years, and when he would have his moments of despair, that there was something more that he should have been in life. And in our perspective, that we did not hold that notion. And yet being able to help intervene in that thought process, I wish more could have been done. He obeyed the gospel at the age of 73, and that was a grand blessing to see. Our identity in so many ways needs to be those who are compassionate to those who are hurting, willing to walk with those who are in pain. It doesn't mean we have the answers. Peter and John and James had no answers to give Jesus, and they even fell asleep while they were waiting with him. But he had the courage, Jesus is, to invite them to come along, and they sat with him, and they were there. I think if nothing more, if we do that as God's people, we will show ourselves to be the kind of compassionate people he needs us to be, wants us to be, in the moments of people's distresses. Anything else, dear friends? You're precious and tremendous people, and I'm thankful for you. Love you all for what you've shared and the time that you have shared this evening, and look forward to worship in the morning. I believe someone was going to wrap up in a prayer, or I'm glad to wrap up in a prayer, or Brian's going to wrap. Somebody named Brian or Bill or with a BR blend is going to close this out. I love you all, and I'm thankful for you. Thank you for your kind